Hi everybody, it is your neighborhood pattern analyst and general dude who's there in your corner looking for your best interest because you know what? I know life gets hard and I know we all need a hand and we all need encouragement and affirmation and validation, you know. And there's a lot of people struggling in the world. I see a pattern there and I've analyzed it and I see a lot of anxiety. I see a lot of PTSD, CPTSD, all kinds of complexes. Basically, people in different states of dissonance that wasn't fully processed or resolved, and it still continues to pull on a string here and put a blockade up here, and affect the overall behavior of a human. All these unresolved dissonances. And what do I mean by that? Well, you'll probably know, if you know anything about psychology, of cognitive dissonance and cognitive consonance. And the idea is that you want to be in a state of cognitive consonance where everything makes sense and everything is kind of predictable and you understand it in any given situation, given your previous experience. Now, dissonance occurs when you experience information in the world that contradicts what you knew prior to going into it. That contradicts your expectations and even your awareness, such as, you know, you might see an alien spacecraft for the first time ever and experience dissonance because you're in total shock and disbelief. And the sign and the symptom of dissonance there is like a gasp, like that's more like it. Not that's more like, oh my god, but it's more like that's why we make that noise, because we're expressing dissonance. It's the same with laughter. Laughter, if you watch any guides on how to do stand-up comedy, it's all about building tension, on leading people's expectations one way and then hitting them with something they didn't expect. And that's one form and very popular method, is to, you know, exaggerate things so fully that people are like, wow, and it builds up tension, or to say something so inappropriate and then make it normal again, so that, you know, you build up that tension and then you release it in the form of laughter. You know, same goes for cooking. You got to keep a tension up for a meal until the climax. Sex, you got to build the tension in cycles and levels until you get to the crescendo. And even music, the actual crescendo, it's all about building tension, and that's what feels good. It's what gets our energy in motion, which is what I consider our emotion to be. It's literally the soul powered energy, the soul force, electricity, radiation, coursing through our veins in the form of blood or water, salt water, because that's a great conduit for electricity, you know. So we have this energy in motion through our 70-80% water bodies, and we have this emotion that builds up, and a lot of the time, if you know, we might express it with a laugh, with a gasp, with a scream of terror, you know, when we experience something that we didn't anticipate and it contradicts everything we know, which is like, and that's what dissonance is that state of being kind of discombobulated and detached from reality. And there's three ways to get back to reality and to normalize, all right, achieve basically consonance, cognitive consonance, and that is by, let's give an example so it's easy. Okay, a man hits his wife in an argument. Now, a man heretofore believed that he would never strike a woman, but he has hit his wife. So there's three things he can do to get out of that state of dissonance that arises after he's struck that first blow. He can either say, oh, you deserve that, and justify it. He can be like, you deserve that, you provoked me, I had no choice, I thought you were going to kill me, you were reaching for a knife, and he can try and justify it. And this comes out of a place of insecurity and a lack of willingness to accept one's own place, you know. So often people who are insecure, selfish, narcissistic, they will just justify their behaviors and turn everything around. So there's justifying. And then there is accepting. All right, so if you're coming from a place of, you know, honesty and authenticness and justice, and you want to know the reality of the situation, then you won't be coming from that place of fear. And you will be more willing to actually look at your position in the situation more earnestly and honestly with open eyes, all right? So there's acceptance. such as the husband says, I need to go seek counseling for anger management or something like that, because he accepts he has a problem, right? Doesn't want that to happen again. So you justify it, or you accept it, and you adapt. You adapt to the new information, like, oh, it's a spaceship. Oh yeah, I've seen that on TV. Not really any dissonance, really, because it's normalized. All right, so you got those two, and then there's the third way that we resolve dissonance, and this is the most extreme way, and the most intriguing in terms of trying to figure out solutions, because it's tricky. It can be very tricky. And the third way that we achieve consonance is through sheer and utter and absolute repression. So you experience something that is so traumatic and unexpected, like a bout of violence, or walking in a park with your dog and the next minute you're being raped, God forbid. All right, and the dissonance produced from that, the tension of being just in, like, I'm having a good time, like with your partner, having a great day, and then by the end of the day you've divorced, and had a huge argument, and you're in this state where your head's swirling, and let's just say the argument was so explosive that one of the parties involved, the people involved, who suffered the greater bouts, the greater heat in the argument, maybe they, and you see this with people when you might be triggered and you shout at somebody, or you say something sternly and somebody just freezes and they go inside and they disconnect and withdraw so far away from you without moving physically, but you can feel them cutting off and moving away, because it's similar to repression, where we're triggered, we have a state triggered where we're under attack and we're fight or flight and defensive and insecure. And so we go inwardly and we push whatever the feelings are that we don't want to engage with really deep. So if there's a person that's triggering something, talking with us, and they might not be intending to do it, but they're triggering us, we might just stop listening at a point and just take it as we took it to begin with, what they said, and then put it down deep and move above it. And it's kind of like repression, where it's like a willful ignorance and choosing just to take something you don't want to confront or resolve or talk about, but you just want to hide deep inside, tied up into a tight knot, which is exactly what ends up becoming. Like, you get people. Last night, actually, I was on my way home from a friend's, and this woman stepped on the bus and she just told me it was her birthday, and I said, "Oh, what are you up to now?" And she goes, "Oh, nothing." And I was like, "Where are you going?" Like, Armadale. And she ended up telling me that she didn't have anywhere to sleep. So I said to her, well, first she said, can I go to yours? And I was like, I'd love to, but I'm staying with my mum at the moment, and she'd be pretty like freaked out if I brought like a stranger and a homeless person home. But so I went, I offered to go to Armadale with her. So I went to Armadale with her and chatted, and she was so wet from the rain, and it was freezing cold, and I was like, it's not even a question, I can't leave this poor soul out here. So we ended up getting a taxi, going back to mine, walking a bit, going to mine, and I told Mum everything, and everything was fine. And Mum was, Mum had the first impressions, like, she even said to this woman, like, I think you're on drugs, blah blah blah. And Mum's like old school, totally against it. And I tried explaining to Mum that when you're homeless and you live in that kind of world where it's constantly watching your back, and there's no respect between thieves, there's no brotherhood, there's no alliances. There are alliances, but then they'll stab each other in the back, turn them upside down, and shake the change loose. You know what I'm saying? It's very dog eat dog, very selfish. So after a while of being in a space, and you might have experienced something like this, like in a relationship that you've been in, where you felt like you could never really be comfortable, you could never just rest easy, you're always pensive and tight and anxious, and feeling displaced, like not at home, and just uncomfortable. And it builds up over time. If you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't respect you, talks down to you, abuses you in any shape or form, and just makes you feel low, after a while of this, especially if it's on the street and you're experiencing not just the people on the street and all the aggro and all the maliciousness and the selfishness and toxicity, but you're also experiencing the elements and Maslow's pyramid, the bottom base is destroyed, no shelter. To adapt to that to adapt to that level, you know, and there would be dissonance there. Like when you find yourself in stages of life where you just refuse it and you can't believe you're there and you're like, how did I get here? And part of you just is your head spinning and you feel you can't take control because part of it is an inability to resolve the dissonance, an inability to either justify why you are where you are at, or an inability to accept it, and an inability to completely repress it. All right, so in these cases, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I'll probably explore in a follow-up video sometime, is basically the idea of, you know, you have anxious people with anxiety. And that's a very common thing that people are open about and talking about and engaging in starting a discussion, and it's really good. But, you know, then I was thinking about the case with this woman from the street, and my mum thinking she's on drugs, and me explaining to her, no, she's just adapted to a high level of tension and a high level of dissonance, all right, from being in this position of life that's just so unpredictable and wretched and miserable, you know, and scary at times. That, you know, she seems like she's on drugs. She seems really intense. And you know, but it's just tension. And when you build up tension, you come off as intense until you find a way to healthily, hopefully, release the tension. And if not healthily, then do it away from prying eyes and make sure you're not hurting someone else. But you got to get the energy out. You got to get the energy in motion. Some energy gets knotted up, and when we push things down and we run away and we put up walls and we hide and we refuse to confront things or be confronted to resolve, and we refuse to resolve things, and you know, just hide from our stuff or delay it and escape in drugs or alcohol, distraction, sex, money, pursuit, ambition, you know. But that dissonance always comes up. Those knots of emotion that weren't quite ironed out and weren't quite resolved will keep resurfacing time and time again. And after a while, we do adapt. And this is the scary thing. When you start building walls and you build your own personal city around these, you know, the PTSD, these anxieties, this dissonance, I think, you know, that's a whole new field that really needs to be explored. The adapted anxious person, or the adapted anxiety, where somebody, you know, maybe like myself, and this is why I got thinking about it, like there's always been this thing where I haven't really felt like I've been an anxious person, and I've always been confident, and very expressive and not shy at all. You know, but there's also this part of me that's like awkward, and awkwardness with people and certain situations, especially where there's like a sense of family, love, people complimenting me, giving me gifts. It's weird, and that creates, I guess, a kind of anxiety. But the thing is, I don't identify as me being anxious or having anxiety, even though these states seem to be consistent and permanent in certain situations. It's always the same way. I'm always awkward, you know, because I've adapted to it. You know what I mean? If anything, I actually kind of get off on awkward moments. Like I've adapted to the weakness, maybe, of previous tensions that I had displaced within myself and various dissonances unresolved, and I had adapted to it. So at one point where I felt like I was an oddball and a weirdo and judged for that, and that made me feel very anxious and lonely at the time, I ended up becoming gothic and embracing my alternative side and being different, and I turned it into a strength and into a form of confidence. That darkness, that dissonance, I turned into something that was empowering and gave me more clarity. Even if it was on a superficial level at that time, I was just climbing the rungs through Maslow's, as you do. So I think it's definitely an interesting idea, and I don't know, there might already be a term for it, but I've never heard of there being like a commonly used distinction between two equally typical, I would say, more or less, types of anxiety. There's kind of fresh anxiety or raw anxiety. And then there's consolidated anxiety. There's anxiety that has over time laid its foundations, and you've worked with it and you've adapted to it, and you've worked it into your narrative, and you have people with victim narratives and stuff. So it becomes part of the structure, and that structure might lead you to be in control, you know what I mean, and confident. So that's an interesting thing, and that's like this person like that I met, and you know, just gave her a bed for the night and some food and whatnot. Because you know, you can't leave someone out on their birthday in the rain. Is that, you know, she strikes me as a very confident person, very sure of herself, conviction, very straight and authentic, and looks right through you. Like, she sees, not through you, but she sees you. And no shit, straightforward, approach. But there is that anxiety and that dissonance, and you can see that she's had a hard life, and that she's been for years having it tough. And you can tell that in people, like, and this person also has like such a soft energy and soft look in her eye, but at the same time seems so hard and agitated, but at peace. Kind of like me, like, there might be a sense of agitation here and there, or unease, but I'm always at peace and content with it. I don't really struggle, like I said, with awkwardness, and, I don't know if that's just me, like, in general, I don't like to cling onto classifications and wear them like a raincoat until I forget where my flesh begins and where the plastic ends, like, to the point where I wear a label or a condition, and then that becomes a crutch for me, or a confirmation bias concept that it ends up imprisoning me, and I can't possibly leave because it's in there, and I'm always going to be filtering information through it, and I'm always going to be confirming the bias for it, because we're going to have bias anytime that there's an excuse for us not performing as well, or not being as progressed in our life, or not being as good as we could be. We will naturally steer towards finding excuses that avoids us having to take the blame ourselves, having to confront and take responsibility, unless one is at that level of development in themselves where that doesn't bring fear, and it doesn't bring that much tension, that it's not so overwhelming that they've got to escape from it and kind of willfully ignore it or repress it away, kind of, and that's the thing, there is some dissonance, there are some contradictions in this world, and there are some things you will experience that really shake foundations and paradigms of what you know. And sometimes it's for better, for worse. Sometimes it is for better. Sometimes it's for better. And sometimes people will ignore things that will create a lot of change in their perspective and challenge them. And even if they know that it will, and they know that it's got good basis and a reason why it would do that, they would still avoid letting it happen because they're nurturing their own narrative and their own things that they've subscribed to, their own stories and concepts, So it's like people fight it off, anything foreign, they fight it off, and it reinforces their own position. So I'm tying this in with the idea of repression, of dissonance. Subconsciously, we just push it down because we can't physically process what the fuck's happening, and we lock it down emotionally. We can't rationalize it. That's why trauma and PTSD is so tricky, because you can't rationalize it. There's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and regressive hypnosis, which puts you back in the state and allows you to kind of relive it and maybe express some things and basically dissolve anchors and dissolve associations and release associations, or reassociate negatives with positives whilst you're hypnotized. That can be effective because that goes directly into the subconscious. It's harder to rationally work with anxiety, I've learned, and it is something I've had to start looking into a little bit more sensitively and deeply, because being a rationalist in my past, working with people, I'm a very straightforward person too. That's why I actually got on with this person I'm helping out just for the day, because she was such a straight shooter, and I like it like that too. Like, cut the bullshit, get to the point, tell it how it is. Don't be afraid to hurt feelings. Just be honest and respectful. And I think there's a lot to that. I forgot where I was just going with that, but I think you get the general idea is, like there's different approaches and there's different kinds of ways that we justify, what we're doing, or ignore things, that's what I was saying, that I've worked with people and it's been hard for them because I haven't been as sensitive with their anxiety, because I'm such a rationalist, and I just think I'll say something abruptly, being an Aquarian, just say it without thinking it, and it'll be something that in the context of their situation or them might be taken away because they're insecure. And maybe one can think, damn, I should have seen that they take it in hindsight the wrong way, but I didn't even think about it at the time. And that's happened with me, where I've said something and they've reacted and been really hurt by it, because like, even if I was just being like, speaking as a motivational speaker and giving some disciplinary, affirmatory advice, somebody might take that as me criticizing them, telling them off, putting them down, making them feel incapable and weak and pathetic. People take things whatever way they take it. So I had to learn, like, and this is especially with people with anxiety. Like, I had to learn about the fact that it's irrational and accept that fact that you can't rationalize. When somebody's in an emotional flurry of color, you can't use the black and white logic to rationalize. It's two different wheels of information, two different platforms of communication entirely. So I think emotional purging can help, and that's why often if you have a fight and you make up, they say make up sex is probably a good way to purge a lot of the emotion and bond and release a lot of the tension, as opposed to just talking more, like actually making time for you just to shut the fuck up and hang out and connect and bond, enjoy each other, get out of your head and back into each other's bodies and into each other's hearts, just share a moment. And I think if we do that in general, will help it a lot. I think at least trying to be present minded and being present in the moment and now, and not worrying about the past or the future, and remembering our past positive memories, our roots, and make sure we're doing what we enjoy doing, so we get that energy in the present and our hedonism. This is from time perspectives. And then we look to the future and our plans and our goals, and that gives us wings. All right, so you want past positive reflection for your roots and your identity, present hedonism, what gives you energy, future goals, what gives you wings to soar to new places. All right, and as long as you keep your roots strong and positive, and you keep your fuel charged up by doing what you enjoy doing, whether that's making love, whether that's being creative or hiking. Do what you enjoy doing. Be hedonistic, and that gives you energy. Use that then to think about the future, where you can take a step of success. Don't think too far ahead. Just one step at a time, 5 steps ahead maybe. A rough 5-year plan loosely, maybe. Depends. But I do think being more, being willing to undergo an initial period of intense adjustment and struggle with that maybe, with confronting a lot of truths about the self, and just confronting a lot of things one knows inside they need to tackle but they don't, like maybe just learning to just be, making time to just not do anything, like putting time in your schedule where you cross things out. Maybe people don't make the time for that, to allow them to be present minded and immersed in the present moment, where they they're not stuck in a realm of ideology and a fabrication of the mind, but they're existent in a unified whole of the moment in the present, and they sense all the energy and the possibility and the beauty and the truth within it. Any answer they need will just come to them. They'll just know where to go, because they're in tune with where they're going, with their intention, with their inner compass. And you got to get real with yourself. You got to get real with yourself if you want to get that compass, and if you want to find that same inner compass we all have that guides us together in unison towards the most harmonious arrangements and formations. But you do need to not destroy your ego, but you need to move through your ego and realize that you are the one wearing a mask. The mask is not wearing you, okay? The ego does not have a person. The person has an ego and utilizes it when appropriate, but realizes it's a mask, and he or she is wearing it, or it is wearing the mask. And that's the thing. Like, once you realize that, you automatically, once you really embrace it, like what that means, you automatically don't care what people think about you. You automatically stop caring what people think. I could keep going on, but this rant is going on a little bit. So I'm going to leave you there, and the main idea was the whole anxiety thing, the adapted anxiety disorder, or maybe not even a disorder, maybe it's just a condition, you could say. Adapted dissonance. I don't know. Disorder, that's ADD. I don't know. I'm sure that you can come up with a name for it, but if you guys can relate to this idea of, like, you feel confident and in control, but there's a sense of unease and awkwardness and anxiety, like in layers deep within you, between the walls that you've built